Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is August the 30th. It is 10 a.m. Central, and we are here with another PODSCast. We're super excited to be meeting with you guys again and to get you some really great information about PODS beyond data management, our great friends at ESRI. So with that, we are going to run through just a couple of quick things, housekeeping items that we want to make sure that you guys are aware of. And also we want to share a safety moment. So look, I know that I've been sharing the same safety moment for quite a while now, but it's very important, especially for those of us here in Houston. And so, yeah, I may still share this safety moment until, I don't know, November. That's when it feels like it might get below 118 degrees outside. So, everybody, please make sure that you're aware of the differences between heat exhaustion and heat stroke, right? So if it was heat stroke and you see any of these issues with your buddies or you're feeling them yourself, please call 911. So once you stop sweating, that is a bad sign. I never realized that, right? So I always thought, sweating meant that you're hot. If you stop sweating, then that could be a sign of a heat stroke. If you're nauseous or vomiting, or if you have a rapid or strong pulse. So if that happens, please call 911 immediately. Versus heat exhaustion, if you feel faint or dizzy, or if you have muscle cramps, make sure you just get into a cool, dry place, right? I tell people all the time, about the tunnels in Houston, and the reason why we have tunnels in Houston is not because of snow or sleet or hail or any of that. It's because of the heat, right? So in fact, I always joke around that if you're walking around on the surface streets in August in Houston, the cops may come ask you what's going on, because that's very odd behavior, right? So just make sure that everybody's staying safe out there in the summer months. And so real quick on your control panel, please remember that this is a interactive podcast, and we want to get your feedback through our polling questions, which we're going to ask you some, and then also if you want to type some questions into the chat or into the questions box, please do. And as time allows, I'll get that over to our panelists today to be able to answer. And so we're going to cover a lot of stuff, but before we get started with that, I just want to again thank everybody for being here, and thank you again so much to ESRI as our principal partner who supports us all throughout the year with a bunch of different things we have going on. And quick plug for that, we were just talking about it, that in October we have coming up our event, our back-to-back event, which is going to be at the Hyatt Regency West Houston. And so on October the 10th, we have our PODS event and Talk Wealth, and then on October the 11th is the ESRI event and their social as well. But don't forget, you have to sign up for both, right? So it is a 2-for-1 situation, but you still have to register for both events so that we can get a good head count. So real quick on PODS, if you're new to PODS or if you're a potential member of PODS, PODS has been around for about 25 years now. In fact, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. And over 200 operators worldwide. And I have to update this slide, guys, because when we were in Rio Pipeline in Brazil, we signed up Peru. So we have our 37th country now. So we're really excited about that. And there's over 3 million miles of pipeline and pipeline asset systems in the PODS data model. So, there's two things that are really important about PODS. Is one is the data model, of course, which we're going to jump into, and Jeff and Sarah are going to show you what you can do with it, but also is the community, right? So we're such an incredible community made up of pipeline operators and the service companies that support them. And with that, we're really excited to announce our new partnership, or our extended partnership. We have a long-time partnership with ESRI, of course, but our extended partnership and harmonizing what we do together. And so ESRI's been gracious enough to allow us some space in the marketplace. So we're working on that right now to be able to put that up there. So we're really excited about all of the stuff we're doing together and working on together. So again, real quick overview on the PODS data model. It's if you have more questions about it, of course, you can reach out to me, or even Jeff and Sarah, who are very familiar with it as well. The main outlines of this data model and the takeaways of it, right, is that it's an open ESRI compatible platform that it's linear reference database and that it standardizes a lot of data. So pipeline operators really gravitate towards the pod data model because it's very easy to organize your data in ways that are about regulatory and compliance, in addition to be able to making business decisions and business cases out of your data as well, right? So Pod 7 has a lot of flexibility in it, which is our current gen. You can take it apart and attach it to the UPDM data model if you'd like. So if you're just interested in the ILI data tables, you can grab those and attach them to any data model that you'd like. So enough about us. We want to hear about you guys. So we're going to launch our first poll question because we want to hear from you who you are, right? We get a lot of different and varying roles in these podcasts, and a lot of different and varying roles that participate in the pods community. So we want to just do a quick check to see who's on the call today, who's on the podcast, and that way, you know, our panel can kind of gravitate towards your role in speaking about the great topics they have to cover today. So a quick poll has just been launched into your browser. If you can, make sure that you put that into your primary monitor. It gets a little tricky if you put it in your secondary or tertiary monitor. And if you can, please go ahead and choose whatever function or role most pertains to you. Listen, I get it. Everybody wears multiple hats and everybody's got 17 jobs at this point. So your primary role in what you do at your job. And if you can, we're going to go ahead and we have 75% of you, 80% of you that have voted now. So I'll close the poll and share the results with you guys. And are we surprised, Jeff, that almost 80%?
Good.
This is great. These are your people. These are your people. So this is wonderful that we're getting those results. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask our incredible, good-looking, smart, big brain panel to introduce themselves. And I forgot to say why. I'm sorry. Monique Roberts, Executive Director of PODS. And so while Jeff and Sarah are telling us a little bit about them, I'm going to launch some other polls into your browser as well so that we can learn a little bit more about what you're trying to get out of this event today, and we can make sure that we touch on those points too. So with that, I'll hand it off to you guys. Tell us who you are. For those, you know, 3 people on the planet that don't know, right?
Sarah, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Ramirez. I'm a solutions engineer here at ESRI. I've been with ESRI a little bit over 2 years, working alongside Jeff Allen with some of our pipeline organizations, helping them understand how to leverage GIS to help better their business and the decisions they make in a day-to-day. So yeah, really great to be here.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everybody for joining us this morning. My name is Jeff Allen. I'm the pipeline practice lead here at ESRI. So my role is to try to take the alphabet soup of ESRI products and make them come alive for pipeline operations and show you how we can leverage your investment in ESRI within your organizations as well, and leverage your investment in pods and make the two really kind of sing together.
That's awesome, Jeff. You're so good at that stuff. Okay, so we are now at over 70% of you that have voted about what are your goals for attending this webinar. So I'm going to close those and share the results so that our panel knows kind of what we're looking to hear about. Now, keep in mind, guys, this was a multi-choice. So if people had more than one goal in attending the webinar, they could choose more than one thing. But it looks like the vast majority of you are looking for some education about ESRI and PODS solutions, and then second being planning for and enhancing your current solutions. So it looks like people are in the grabbing of information and cultivating that information to try to make some good solutions, Jeff.
Awesome. We got the right presentation then.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'd have to switch it up to another one. All right, guys, so before we get into all of the good stuff that we have planned today, I want to just do one more qualifying question for the group, and that way we can speak even more directly and detailed about the PODS data model and the ESRI solutions as well, and how they are harmonized. So if you can, go into the quick poll one more time and let us know what version of the PODS data model you currently have deployed. You know, over 25 years, Jeff, you know, I know you started with PODS when you were like 4 or 5 years old, right? You've seen every iteration of the model at this point, right? So if you had to guess, what would you say the majority of our
Wow.
attendees? Yeah.
I think we're going to see a pretty good spread over 401, 5, 6, and 7 spatial is going to be my guess.
Okay. Okay.
See
All right.
an even distribution.
Even distribution. Okay. What about you, Sarah?
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to follow what Jeff says. Even distribution. Yep.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Well, we are now at over 70% of you have voted. So we'll close the poll, and this is, I mean, you guys need to go to the casino. Seriously, go buy a lottery ticket today.
25% other though. I'm really curious what those are. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Do you think maybe it's they're not sure what model they're on, or maybe it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different things? Because you know the PODS data model is the most customizable standard that I've ever seen, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty crazy stuff. All right. Well, we will go ahead and jump right in. So let's see. I'm going to find you, Jeff, and hand over the controls so that you can start walking us through all this great content.
Awesome. Can you guys see my slide?
Let's see. Not just yet. And oh, we have movement. Looks like it's thinking. It's got to come all the way from Canada down to Houston, right? Aren't you?
Yeah.
Jeff, you're in the ESRI Calgary offices today, right?
I am.
Coming to you live from a balmy, what, 84 degrees up there? What is it?
Yeah, no, it was nice this morning. It's nice not to wake up to plus 100 degrees at 7 o'clock in the morning. So
that's quite nice. Run from one air conditioning to the next air conditioning.
Exactly.
So don't come home, man. Don't come home until it cools off.
Can you
right,
see that slide now? Yeah, cool.
We sure
so
can.
Thanks everybody, and again, thanks for joining us this morning. We're really thinking about what we could present this morning, and you know, we've talked about APR, we've talked about utility network, and all the different things we can do with the data model. And Sarah and I were thinking like, well, we really never talk about what we do with the data after we have it in pods, and how we share that out with the rest of the organization, and what analytics we can do with it, things like that. So we wanted to put together a couple of examples of what that looked like. And for my part of the presentation, I was really going to kind of dig into some of the use cases and where we see organizations leveraging the asset database and the PODS database. And one of the things that routinely comes up, and we hear more and more these days, is this idea of digital transformation, right? And if we think about the early versions of PODS, you know, some of the primary use cases were around just replacing alignment sheet generation processes, right? So points and lines on a map. But as we get more and more deep into these workflows, there's this increased demand for the amount of data that we pour into the PODS data model, because we're servicing so many more stakeholders within the organization. And that really puts a lot of pressure on the systems, the IT systems, the GIS systems, how we maintain, how we model, how we think of how linear referencing works, and how we think about how connected pipelines work. And we've been doing a lot of thought leadership at ESRI and trying to figure out how all this stuff goes into the data model, into the enterprise database and pods, and how we kind of leverage that. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. And the other thing that we're seeing is, you know, beyond just our traditional midstream operators, you know, we see pods being used in a lot of the upstream oil and gas providers as well. And now those companies are now diversifying their portfolio. So the number of people that are hitting GIS, number of people that are accessing this data across these organizations is increasing. if we really kind of focus, again, really on that pipeline workflow within these organizations, and we sort of open up that bucket, these are the different things that we typically see organizations utilizing their system for. And so no matter where we go in the world, we'll always find an asset management group. Sometimes they're in engineering, sometimes they're in IT, sometimes they're in integrity. But there's somebody responsible for pouring the data into the data model and maintaining it over time. And even there's a lot of change going on with those folks, because we've got things like traceable, verifiable, complete, a whole bunch of new kind of regulatory requirements that require new data sets to be loaded into the data model. So we see a lot of focus there, but always, and kind of I think we saw that in the poll this morning, we always sort of find, a pipeline integrity team adjacent or very close by, because it's, most of the data or majority of the data and analytics we run off that central database for pipeline integrity comes from that PODS model, and a key driver within the business. But then beyond those, when we see kind of pipeline integrity and asset management working together, then the real trick is how do we share that out? And like with folks like health and safety, the business teams, asset operations. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on today, is kind of expanding that to the right. And the other interesting part of this too is we often see organizations now rethinking how data gets loaded into the model, right? And if we're going to supply data to operations, well, it better be in there the day that the product starts flowing in that pipeline. And to be able to do that, we need to have automated processes on the asset development side. So as soon as that as-built is finished, we need to be able to efficiently load that data into the model and then share that out with the rest of the organization.
Jeff, real quick, before you keep going, I'm going to just say we had a couple of issues on the volume, so we need you to yell at us a little bit. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. No worries. We also see this idea that, this location intelligence platform is really kind of transforming these organizations, allowing us to connect people within the organization through location. Right, so underpinning that, those workflows and those different use cases that we showed in the previous slide is the enterprise platform. And Sarah and I often say, hey, if you can figure out where something is, we can tell you a lot of information about it and how that can be shared across the organization. We often think of location as the ultimate foreign key, right? Once we know where things are, we can start making sense of how they operate, how they interact with each other. But when we think of the GIS, we think of these kind of three fundamental things that we weave together. We have the system of record, the data model. We have the system of engagement. How do we share that information out with the rest of the organization? And then we have the system of insights. How do we gain knowledge from that data that we can then share with the organization, right? Those are the analytics. But I think of the system of engagement of kind of the verb to the noun. Like, what do I do with it once I have it? How do I gain value from that investment I've made in building out that data set? And so we look at that sort of the business demands around how we put this geospatial infrastructure together. PODS really focuses on the model, on how to store that model and how to maintain and prepare that for use across the organization, right? That's where we really focus a lot of our time and energy on the PODS organization. But once we've finished that work, then what we're going to show you today is how we access, share, visualize, and analyze that data, right? Because this is where you can really start leveraging some of the out-of-the-box tools that come with ESRI to take advantage of that investment you've made in building that data model. And then we'll also show you a little bit on the collect side, right? So we were talking about that workflow from like as-builting, and that could also extend to operations and O&M reports. How do we collect data to keep feeding that model as ongoing operations happen in the field? Oops, sorry about that. Now, one of the things that often companies struggle with is to try to figure out how to pin together all the different pieces of the ESRI platform that they might own. You've got ArcGIS everything, right, under the sun. And so we often come back to this pattern of use slide. And what this pattern of use slide is meant to be is sort of all the major components that you could potentially use our software for, the ESRI stack for, right? So obviously data management, mapping and visualization, mobility, analytics. These are all kind of key patterns of use within the platform. And the idea behind this is your key to talk to the business, to figure out what the business is trying to do. And if you can link their needs back to these patterns of use, if I take a typical example of trying to map and manage anomalies along a pipeline from an ILI run, I'm going to clearly need some mapping and visualization. I'm going to need some analytics. I'll need some decision support tools, and I'll need some design and planning tools to plan out my work. If we can figure out what the pattern is, these patterns tie directly back to the ESRI solutions, right? So when we start talking to the business, we don't talk about GeoEvent Server or ArcGIS Enterprise or Portal. We talk about mapping and visualization analytics. And once we know what their use case is, then we can start building out solutions to help them solve their problems. So a lot of companies are trying to figure out, okay, I know I need to do this. I know I need to involve more stakeholders to drive more value for my investment. Where do I start? So one of the things that we often say is, hey, don't forget your GIS professionals, right? Things like ArcGIS Pro and all the tools that are in those toolbox. This is what's going to help you drive and build those data sets out, right? And these are the core of how we kind of map and manage that geospatial infrastructure in that PODS database. If you haven't moved to Pro yet, if you're still on ArcGIS Desktop, this is a great time to start looking at it, because a lot of these capabilities we're going to show you today around sharing and collaboration are really made possible by the infrastructure that sits within ArcGIS Pro as we share that data out with the organization. But the second part of that is creating a destination, right? The portal or ArcGIS Online are two pieces of software that allow you to do this, but ultimately what we're trying to do is come up with ways to make geospatial data and applications and workflows more accessible to the non-GIS professionals, right? When we first started doing this and we first started doing web mapping, we all created the first web maps on Silverlight or Flex viewers, and we threw every widget we could find at the web viewer, and we handed that out to everybody in the organization. And what happened was, for a casual user, that's too much, right? It's too complicated. If I use it once, twice, 3 times a week, there's too many options, too many buttons to press. So we start thinking about breaking down these applications into kind of fit for purpose use, right? Sarah and I often call it 3 clicks or less, right? If you can't go in the application and figure it out, it's probably too complicated for the average Joe to use. So we start using the portal to organize all these different maps and apps. So when somebody goes to the portal, they don't just have 1,000 different options, but if I'm the right-of-way team, then I see all the things that are germane to my particular. If I'm in integrity, if I'm in operations, I can easily find these spatial products and then consume them, just like tools in my toolbox. I can have easy access to them. And I'm not going to steal the win from Sarah, because she's going to show you some really cool examples. But this is what we kind of want to focus on today, is how do you leverage that investment in pods and put together ready-to-use maps and apps, utilizing that underpinning asset data throughout the organization. And really these idea behind this is these maps and these apps tell relevant stories, right? So like in this example here, we're pulling together a dashboard and a story map about the process or progress of right-of-way acquisition for a new pipeline. So this is something I could bring you up in a status meeting or a weekly stand-up call, and we could walk down through it. And this idea that the map or the graphic shows us immediately where we are in the project, I get a greater sense than looking at an Excel spreadsheet of where we are and how we do it. So this picture is 1,000 words is really relevant to this type of workflow. Then we also have, beyond the office worker, how do we then share that information out to the rest of the organization that might not be in the office? And for pipeline, this is especially important because oftentimes our users are in an area with low bandwidth or often no bandwidth. So we have to be able to, easily support offline viewing and offline data collection and be able to sync that back. And we often say that ESRI has the plumbing to make that happen, and the apps that work on top of that plumbing to move data easily in and out of the field and share it. And this is a big part of that collaboration, is to make sure we can enable our field workers to have just as easy access to the data as if they were sitting in the back office. Now, when we think about viewing and data collection and accessing apps, that's only one step of the process. From there, we really want to enable users with tools that they can extract valuable information, whether that's just simply doing some measurements or understanding where they are along the system, locating and finding, determining how to best route to places, or making advanced analytical predictions about the pipeline and pipeline operations. These are all that system of insights, right? And this is really kind of the holy grail. So we manage the data, we share it with the organization, and then the organization has the ability to extract value from that data and pull it forward. And so within the tool set are a number of different applications and processing and machine learning and spatial analytics that you can then align to pull out these use cases. I think the hardest thing to do is to dream up the use cases, right? So we need the data. That's why we're all here, putting the data in the model. We need to be able to access and visualize it. And then we need to understand what is that analytical process I'm trying to solve, and then figure out how to put that together with the appropriate tool set and then share that information out. So a lot of companies are investing in data science and spatial analytics to pull that information together as they start leveraging more and more of their investment in the ESRI platform. So when we look at the typical journey for a company in this building out these GIS systems, everybody started with some type of departmental implementation. Typically, I often say, nobody ever bought SAP to be a departmental system, but that's how GIS started, right? It was a mapping system. It was a CAD replacement tool in most organizations as they started. And so ESRI is always trying to get our elbows out to really move up the organizational ladder and have GIS and have this PODS data model viewed as an enterprise asset. So, there was this organic growth, as we started building out new capabilities and putting more and more data into the model, we started seeing additional use cases, right? And often at this point, we often find within an organization some type of champion or evangelist for GIS that's kind of running around the organization saying, hey, we should be doing more with GIS. And that typically grew into some type of larger implementation, maybe multi-departmental at this point. Oftentimes this is where we saw the integrity management team starting to get involved to leverage the PODS model and leverage the ESRI investment. And then what we're really striving for is this, community of GIS users across the organization, this cross-organizational growth, really starting to look at those other business units. And once you start looking at those other business units, then there's this sort of desire for this larger geospatial strategy, and this really kind of view GIS and the PODS platform as an enterprise asset across the organization. Every pipeline operator we talk to is somewhere in this growth path, but almost everybody we talk to, nobody's saying, hey, I'm happy to stay as a departmental system, or I'm happy with just doing integrity management. Everybody's trying to move up this ladder and figure out how they can leverage their investment both in PODS and ESRI across their organization. And so we often at this point would say, hey, it's probably good to stop, take inventory of where you are, where all your stakeholders are, and sort of build that geospatial strategy. What is that plan? What does that 1, 2, 3 year plan look like? So we're not just reactive to what people are coming to us and asking us for on the fly, but we know what groups we have to prioritize, where the biggest value is for the organization, and what things we could tackle first, second, and third. And we've all been in this kind of whirlwind of needs and getting things done, right? And this is a real reason to have a good strategy, because if you look at the different challenges that we all face, I think all of us can pick 1, 2, 3, maybe all of these challenges and say, yeah, that's my organization, right? Maybe it's silos, maybe it's digital transformation initiatives being driven by others, lack of innovation, data governance issues, right? These are all things that a strategy would help mitigate against. And so going back, remember those patterns of use. The thing that we do in these geospatial strategies is we take all our stakeholders down the left-hand side, and we take all those patterns of use across the top, and we create a matrix. We say, who's expressed a need? Who has a foundational use already? And where are our advanced users? And this kind of maps us where we are in the organization, right? So maybe the mapping and visualization column, we've got, down pat. Everybody's either advanced or a foundational user, and we've got all our bases covered there. But maybe when we move into field mobility, maybe only one or two groups have really started using it, and there's an expressed need across the organization. Okay, so maybe field mobility is something we can focus on within the organization. And this helps us map out where our opportunities are for growth within the PODS model and the GIS across the organization. And then it really comes down to prioritization, right? And this is where I see a lot of organizations get kind of mired down, because they might pick a really hard workflow that doesn't really kind of have a lot of business value, right? Those are the ones we want to try to avoid. The ones we want to try to have right out of the box to get more and more interest in GIS are these quick wins. Find me something that's easy to do and has a really high business value. We should be able to knock those out, and that's going to help us progress our investment and really getting more and more stakeholders involved with the enterprise GIS system. And then the other ones we're looking for are a little harder projects to do, but still come with high value. Those are the ones we really want to plan out, right? So next year we're going to try to tackle this project. So let's get them funded. Let's get them on the radar. Let's make sure we have resources, make sure we have the software. And then there are other ones that we might want to tackle eventually. Maybe they have a little lower business value, but still easy. Let's plan those, right? So there's going to always be time within the year that we can knock off one or two of these kind of easier ones. And so we take all those prioritizations from the previous page, we lay those out, and that becomes the foundation for our plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and she's going to show you some of the things that we've been doing with the ESRI platform and sharing information across these organizations using the ESRI toolset. Sarah?
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. All right, let me get this out of the way. Is my screen coming across correctly?
It is.
Oh, okay, awesome. Great. Yeah, so thanks for kind of going through that, Jeff, and really setting the stage for just kind of showing how we can start leveraging some of those, system of engagement concepts and really starting to leverage some of the tools within our ESRI toolbox. So really where this story starts off with is with having our foundational kind of base viewer web map, right? So what we're looking at here is kind of just our facility overview, right? This is a map that's really going to contain foundational layers that I can carry across different types of applications that are relevant to every group. So you can see I have some, field offices, my devices, even my center lines. Again, this is at the most simplest form, just kind of that base viewer that we can start building out and having as our authoritative web map. And really, when you have your web map built out and ready to go, you can just create an application. So for example, if I go ahead and select this Create App button, we have a couple of examples. I can take this same exact web map and put it into an application that wraps it with any sort of kind of key functionality, depending on really the workflow that we're trying to do. One of the most quickest and simplest applications to put together is our first example, an instant application. So really, again, it's going to take that web map and start adding maybe certain tools or key capabilities that I want to be able to provide my end users. So at the simplest level, right, we can provide a nice user guide within our instant app, talking about who's maintaining this information, how can you start using this application. I can start, exploring the legend again to understand what it is I'm looking at on my map view. We can even start including simple things like searching, right? So I can set up my application to search for specific valve IDs on my map and then zoom to that location and select that, right? Oh, my screen just blinked. There we go. Now, as I'm searching this information, right, we can kind of see over here on the left as my map loads, this is containing our pop-up information. Now, as you all probably know, when you interact with a web map and you select on a certain feature, you want to understand some of the underlying details about it. So here I've kind of created a nice custom pop-up for this valve, really just relaying the relevant information that I'm looking at. What's the type of valve I'm looking at? What's the life cycle status? These are kind of those key underlying fields that can come from my data model, and I can actually use those and present them in a way that's easily digestible and easy to read, instead of, having my entire attribute table and viewing maybe blank or null values, right? We can provide targeted information at a certain location. So again, this is our instant app. There's other capabilities you can include in here if you want to include a simple filter. I personally always love our base map gallery and bookmarks, things like that. So again, at the simplest form, instant apps are a really great way to take a web map and just wrap it with that functionality. All right, let's talk about a couple of other examples. So actually, we were talking about, having that portal landing page where people can come in and start accessing content in a pretty streamlined and easy to use way. So what we're looking at here is using another example of one of our app builders called ArcGIS Experience Builder. If you're not familiar with Experience Builder, it's kind of our next generation app builder. You can create maybe map-centric applications, or you can even create kind of website looking pages, right? So that's what I've done here in this Experience Builder example. This is really meant to be kind of the landing page where people can come in and start viewing different departmental applications that I've built out. For example, if we select on our operations page, here you can see I have a series of different apps that I've built out that are just embedded in here, so people can come in and easily access them. I can even include links out to maybe different videos, right? And let's go ahead and take a look at one of these. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and open up our 811 one call dashboard. Let me go ahead and refresh this. Oop. Just give it a second. All right. So we talked a little bit about Experience Builder. In this case, what we're looking at is another app builder using our dashboard technology. So really, dashboards are great for kind of, let's just say, taking that base web map that we have, but adding more of kind of a reporting engine view to it. So I can start maybe monitoring the status, in this case, of certain tickets that were called in along my line. I can include nice KPI, total counts of my tickets. I can include charts and graphs that include, in this case, showing the total tickets by each type. And really, these dashboards are meant to be interactive and easy to build out. So it's a drag and drop configuration. As I'm building this out, I don't need to be, coding or configuring anything specifically. I can just use that same underlying authoritative information and use it to drive all of these different elements. So as I, select on a certain ticket type on my pie chart, you can see I will filter different elements within my application as well. So it's all meant to be very interactive. I can filter, I can slice and dice my data, and it will update in real time. I can also use, my map view to go ahead and start zooming in, which is also going to update all of the different elements on my dashboard and as well. Is it flickering on your side as well?
Yeah, a little
the
bit, Sarah.
screen by any chance?
Yeah,
It
a
is.
little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Something with my connection. Anyways, so again, dashboard is really, again, if you want to kind of monitor or communicate the status of a certain activity or workflow, this is really where I would start leveraging something like the one call ticket dashboard in this case. So this is one example of one of our dashboards. Another example that we've built out is, let me refresh my dashboard, all around the idea of kind of monitoring inline inspection activities. Now, this is a pretty cool example because not only can we use that base foundational web map, we can also start pulling in information in this example, kind of coming in from our field or mobile users. So here I can start pulling up, oh my gosh, okay. my completed inspections gone along my line in addition to my worker locations as well. So that as they're, out there completing these inline inspections, I can see in real time that their location, I can see maybe their status if they're working or if they're taking a break. And as they're collecting all this information, this in real time is going to be updating my dashboard, right? So this is going to be just using that same kind of service and updating and driving all of the different elements and charts and graphs within my dashboard as well. So we've taken a look at, some of the examples of our app builders within kind of, back in the office, how I can use this at my desk, right? So let's go ahead and switch gears a bit and take a look at how we can leverage some of these capabilities in our mobile solutions as well. All right, so what we're looking at here is me on my tablet, and we're taking a look at ArcGIS field maps. So beyond the office, beyond the desk, we can start pulling in our web maps directly on our mobile devices and just access that same real-time authoritative information. And if you're not familiar with ArcGIS Field Maps, it's really our flagship mobile application for all things. You can take dynamic maps out into the field. You can simply just use this as a viewing tool, as a simple viewer, and just interact with the layers. Or you can even start using this as maybe a data collection tool. In our case, we were looking at inspection monitoring and collecting that information. So there's a couple of different ways that we can start leveraging this application. At the simplest, we can start exploring all of the different layers that we're looking at here in our map. We can also leverage our search capability to zoom to predefined locations, in this case, our valve device here, and it's going to select that location on my map. And you can see here, we've set up a nice custom pop-up, right? So this is kind of what we were looking at earlier in our instant application. All of those pop-ups that we create not only carry throughout all of our apps in the office, they'll actually carry into our mobile applications as well, making it, really easy to just pull relevant information instead of having to scramble around and find it. Now, one of the cool kind of new capabilities within field maps is the ability to start tapping into some of our utility network capabilities. So if I have a connected network or system within my map here, I can actually start running what we call traces in our utility network to understand kind of where resources flow and how our network is all connected. Let's just say that I'm at this specific valve location and I need to understand all of the downstream assets from this specific point. Field Maps actually has that utility network tracing capability built right into it, so that it's going to select all of the features in my network that are going to be downstream from this specific location. And you'll see all of those features highlighted on my map as well. In addition to tracing, we can also start leveraging some of the other capabilities like containment within Field Maps. So for example, at this pump station, we can see all of the different devices or junctions like welds and flanges. These are all features that are going to be contained and were set up in the pump station container. So another kind of cool capability that you can leverage directly within Field Maps. Also, we can start pulling in those associations. So you can see here the red dotted lines. These are going to represent the relationships between our features that aren't geometrically coincident, and I can also start pulling that in. This is all really kind of rich capability that we have built in our utility network that we can now move from beyond just our desktop, but also we can push these out into the field as well. So again, this is kind of an overview of some of the capabilities within our Field Maps application. But the last example that I really wanted to cover was around taking these same utility network capabilities and actually pushing them into another one of our application builders.
Sarah, whenever you get through this one, I wanted to let you know that we have a couple of questions that are coming through on the chat box. So I just want to, if you have a little bit of time at the end, I'm gonna throw those over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. Give it a second to load here. All right. Still thinking. Okay, so we saw some of the cool kind of tracing capabilities and containment within field maps. So what I really wanted to talk about here is taking those and kind of leveraging them in our application builders. So earlier I mentioned, you know, you can use the Experience Builder application as maybe like a website or a landing page and link out to other content. We can also start building out map-centric applications using the same Experience Builder experience. So within this kind of view here, we have a couple of different tools or widgets that we can start including. Specifically over on the right, we have our utility network trace widget. So what this is going to allow me to do is run a series of, you know, maybe predefined traces that I have set up within my network. At the most, you know, high level case, we can actually run just a simple connected trace to help us identify all of the different features within our network that are just connected. So I'll have to define maybe a point where I want to go ahead and start the trace. If I wanted to include maybe a barrier or a place I want to restrict where I want to show that flow, I can also use that here as well. So once I run that, this widget's automatically going to select all of the different features that are within my network. So you can see here it's selected 825 features that are connected all within my pipe system utility network. And the widget's actually going to break it down by the total, you know, different types of equipment and even the count of each equipment you can see over here on the right. Now, what's really interesting is you can kind of run these traces, different types of analysis, and use these results to start driving other different tools or widgets within my experience. So you can see down here at the bottom, I have a trace results table showing me all of the features that I have, you know, that were selected during my trace. And I can, you know, choose to export these out. Maybe if I wanted to send this off to my manager or any, you know, any stakeholder in this process, I can do that with these results. I can pan to them, zoom to them, etc. I can also take those same results and use them to drive different charts or graphs within my Experience Builder app, right? So not only are we just visualizing, you know, all of the different locations, we can start really gaining insight and gathering kind of like these different charts and metrics all within kind of this output from just running a trace on my network. So this is really kind of, you know, the most kind of advanced capabilities that we can talk about right now with the utility network and Experience Builder. But really what we've covered today is kind of having that, you know, base map, our facility map, taking that and plugging it into different applications, whether it be a simple instant application, maybe we're putting it into a reporting engine like a dashboard. We can even take those same things out into the field we saw with our ArcGIS Field Maps application, and then also using some of the advanced tracing capabilities here all within our Experience Builder application. So that's kind of an overview of some of the different, you know, art of the possibilities here. So I'll go ahead and hand it back over. Thank you.
Awesome. Sarah, that was awesome. So guys, we do have a couple of questions that have come up on the question box. The first one being, could you please explain where the ILI data is stored and how it's made live?
Monique, that's a good plug for your new ILI module.
I was hoping you would say that. I'm like, this is not a baked question. This is a real question that came from a real operator who I will definitely have to buy a drink for later to say thank you. So, yeah, before you guys get into that, so we did when we released PODS 7, right? And you know, I'm not going to get too technical because y'all know, everybody knows that that's not my role here. But when we released PODS 7, it was built specifically so that you could build anything on top of it, right? So that you could take it apart, you could put it together, you could do whatever you wanted. And so when PODS 7 was released, the idea is that we were going to release additional modules, you know, after that. And so the first module that was released after PODS 7 came out was the ILI data tables. And so we released that in December of last year. And the reason why those ILI data module was developed specifically is because there's just so much data involved. There's so many attributes in in one run alone, you'll have 500, 500,000 data points that you have to have, and it can be somewhat difficult, right? We have a member, and that's what's so cool about the PODS community, right, is that everybody works together and shares information with each other. And so we have an operator member that that manages and operates brine pipeline, right? Well, so it's brine is pretty corrosive, right? I mean, you don't have to be a scientist to understand that, right? So they do have to run quite a few pigs on a regular basis, right, to ensure. So even though they're not federally regulated to do so, they do so because it's good operationally for them to be able to do that. And so they have been using the new ILI data tables and have had no issue whatsoever, right? So historically, if you're throwing your ILI data in there, it's going to slow the rest of your system down, right? I'll give you an example. When Tracy Thorlifson first put ARC on my computer many years ago, I immediately took it off because it slowed my computer down, right? And he's like, well, what do you mean? You don't want all of this data, logging up your machine and everything? I was like, no. So the ILI data tables were built specifically for that, right? So that those ILI data tables are available for download through the member portal for all of our members now, and they've been tested and retested again. And so with the new Pod 7 for Utility Network, right, which is going to be released for the entire membership at our fall forum on October the 10th, that's been tested by several operators as well, right? And so again, we're just going to keep building on top of Pod 7 based on what the membership is desiring and what the community is looking for. So yeah, and again, what's cool about the ILI data models, data tables. So say you're an LDC, you have a lot of distribution and a little bit of transmission pipe, right? And you're on UPDM, and but you need somewhere to store all of your ILI data for your transmission pipe, right? So you can go grab those ILI data tables and attach them to your UPDM database now, and it's really just much more convenient. So we've been trying recently and for the past several years to really listen in to what our community is asking for and develop that and put that forward. So yeah, if you want some more information about the ILI data tables, we did a PODSCast on that last year, so I'll send everybody a link to that so you can check that out. And one of our committee members from Plains actually did a demo on how to download those data tables and how to load data directly into them. So that's a step-by-step demonstration on how to do that. So I'm not gonna ask Sarah and Jeff to show everybody how to do that directly because we already have that, and we'll send that link out. But that being said, I'll answer for them in saying that the data is absolutely in there, and that every operator and every business is different on how they want to show that. Another really cool thing, because you let me talk about something and I'll keep talking about it, is now you can house all of your ILI data in the same place. So say you did a run with Rosen a couple years ago, and you're doing another run with TDW, and so you want to have all of your tool vendors and all of the data all in the same spot, and you can do that now. So it's really some cool stuff that I do believe that there's a couple of PODS members that are looking to write some papers about that and about how they've been using that in the future. So we look forward to hearing from them on that and their use cases on how they've been able to use that to betterment of their business and to optimize their operations as well. So Jeff, Sarah, do you want to add on any of that? Or
Yeah, no, that's perfect, because once it hits those PODS ILI tables, then we spatialize it and then we visualize it, right? And we could do a whole nother podcast on different strategies around big data analytics, how to size your servers appropriately to deal with that size and volume of information, strategies. Because I think one thing people think about is 100 and millions of records of ILI data. Nobody turns them all on at the United States level and expects to see all the points. There's no value to that, right? So there's strategies about boiling the ocean down to, okay, where are the anomalies? Where are the anomalies that we need to go to inspect? Where are the inspection reports? And be able to make sense out of this massive amount of data. And the other part of that, because we talked about analytics a little bit, is to now look at that data over time, right? So I know there's some ILI vendors out there that are building these sort of massive backend databases to say, hey, if you have a non-pickable pipeline and it's in these conditions, and they're pulling from their historical archive, they're pulling from our living atlas and saying where these pipelines are in the world, more likely than that pipeline needs to be inspected based on what we know from every pipeline we've ever inspected in the past. That's a big data analytics problem, and it's really cool to see how companies are leveraging things like the big data spatial analytics in the living atlas along with physical data to come up with these answers, right? Because on the end of the day, what's the goal? To keep the hydrocarbons inside the steel, right? And if I could come up with a system that could tell you where the next leak is going to be, I probably wouldn't do it be a podcast right now.
Right.
I'd be on my yacht somewhere.
Right. Yeah. So
But that's
Jeff,
ultimately that's what we're after, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point. So, now that you have all of that data in your PODS ILI data tables from all your different vendors, now you can use the ESRI tools and the ESRI partner tools as well to visualize that for run-to-run analysis and to see everything. And then on top of that, ESRI's been giving us awesome links to all of this great data that we've been using to give to our members, right, in our data resource center for additional layers to know what's around the pipeline. So the Living Atlas is one of them, right? And so we have the USGS data, we have ESRI's Living Atlas, we have a ton of data layers that it's especially valuable to our smaller operators that really just don't have the resources, right, that our larger operators do. And so now being a PODS member, they can go grab and pull down all of that data that's live, right, and it's constantly updating, and they can use it for their calculations, right, for risk. They can use it for their emergency management programs, right? So this really goes way beyond GIS, and hopefully this has been valuable to all of you. Like what Jeff was saying, we want to make sure that you're showing your value of these maps within your organization and to your leadership and to your customers, right, which are your users, right? We want to make sure that we're capitalizing on all of this data and that we're truly telling a story, because like Jeff said, it's picture's worth 1,000 words. You see it on a map, and now you can say, oh wow, look at this. Look, here's, our center line might be off a little bit from the last run to this run or whatnot. So all of that data is very, very important, and we just need to take it to the next step, right? Which is effectively to help you get a promotion and a raise at your job, right?
And you bring up a good point, Monique. What we showed today were some of the quick wins, right? High value, quick wins out of the box. You already own the tools. How do you engage with other stakeholders? But ultimately, it's going to come down to some pretty detailed, SME workflows around pipeline. And that's where we leverage the ESRI partners, because ESRI's never going to build an MAOP calculator or HCA or class calculator review or risk analysis. Those are going to come from our partners. We're going to build a foundation onto which to build those analytical tools. So I think the other thing that's really interesting about that is, one of the things that Monique mentioned is PODS, being able to leverage the ESRI marketplace, right? To have a copy of the PODS model that you can discover from the ESRI marketplace. If you haven't checked out the ESRI marketplace, there's literally thousands of tools up there and widgets that you can buy for low cost or no cost that enhance that experience in those web maps and those apps. So if you haven't looked recently, I would definitely recommend that, because Sarah and I find them all the time, really cool stuff that we've never even thought about. And I think my last point, and Sarah had kind of brought it up in her demos, please don't take all the PODS tables and just expose them to your poor end users. It was never intended to do that.
Custom pop-up.
If you're showing GUIDs, if your users are seeing GUIDs come up when they click on a valve, check out those arcade expressions and those custom pop-ups, because anytime we can make that experience for the non-GIS professional, they're going to be your next cheerleader, stakeholder, champion that's going to go out and say, oh, you've got to see this. This is really cool, right? And so that's a little bit of work. And that the other idea here too is, as we're skipping around these apps, there's a common look and feel, right? So we have one map, has multiple apps associated with it, but it's not green in this map and orange in this map and yellow when I go over here. Like, there's a common thread through all these things that we can use. So with that, I know we're kind of running up against time, but we want to thank everybody and let us know. I have a couple of email links here if you guys want to reach out to us on anything. please don't be shy. We're happy to share any of the samples or dig in deeper on anything that we showed today, or any ideas you have that you haven't seen yet. Sarah and I are always
Yep.
looking for great ideas to build
Good
out
point.
for our next demo. So
Yeah, and take those ideas with you next month, you know, the road show, right? So the ESRI pipeline seminar in Tulsa, right, and Denver in those 2 weeks. And so look for those links and make sure that you register for those. Pods will be in force in there too, right? Because a lot of those ESRI partners, right, are also Pods members too, right? There's a lot of synergy there. And so, and then also
100%.
don't forget, right, to sign up for the Houston event too, where we're going to have the big PODS event and also the ESRI Houston pipeline seminar. So it's going to be great. We're going to get together and talk about all these questions and share information and innovate with each other. So again, thank you so much, Jeff and Sarah. This was very, very informative and a lot of good takeaways for, again, for all of these GIS professionals to go get raises, right, and show their bosses all of the great stuff that they have going on, right? So again, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and thanks everybody.
Thanks, Monique. We appreciate
Thank
the
you.
time and opportunity. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye-bye.